They say love is strongest when tested by distance. But I learned that sometimes, distance doesn't test love, it reveals its limits. When I first met Marcus Grant, I wasn't looking for forever. I was just a nurse working long night shifts in Savannah, trying to keep my world together after my father's passing. He came in one rainy night, not as a patient, but as a rescuer, helping me push a stalled car out of the hospital parking lot. He laughed as the rain poured over us and said, "Guess you needed an engineer tonight." That was Marcus. Charming. Confident. The kind of man who made ordinary moments feel cinematic. We married a year later under the oak trees behind my grandmother's house, lanterns hanging from branches, our friends humming an off-key love song. I remember thinking, this is what peace feels like. But peace is a fragile thing. It doesn't announce when it's about to leave. Marcus worked as a civil engineer. Ambitious, driven. When the offer came, a 2-year construction project in Alaska, he said it was the opportunity of a lifetime. He promised it would set us up financially, that we'd never worry about bills again. I looked at our little home, our 10-year-old son Jay sleeping in his room, and said the words every supportive wife says, "Do what you have to. We'll be right here." What I didn't realize then was how those words would echo in the years to come. Every Sunday, I'd dust the same photo frame on our mantel, the one of our wedding day. My hand would linger over the glass longer than it should. It wasn't just a frame, it was my ritual, a promise to keep waiting. When people asked, "Don't you get lonely?" I'd smile and say, 2 years isn't forever. But deep down, I wondered if forever was already slipping away, one unanswered call, one silent night at a time. The house felt too quiet after he left. I filled the silence with the sound of Jace's laughter, the hum of the washing machine, and the whisper of my prayers. I made excuses for Marcus, he's busy, he's tired, the signal's bad up north. But sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself staring at that photo frame and asking, if love is strong enough to last 2 years apart, why do I feel like he's already gone? I didn't know it then, but the story of my marriage wasn't about distance. It was about deception, carefully wrapped in the language of love. 2 sharp truths were waiting just around the corner. One would shatter everything I believed about him. The other would teach me what it really means to start over. And the cruelest part? Both of them began with a single promise, the kind that sounds like forever, until it isn't. Tell me, would you have trusted him? Would you have waited for a man who said all the right things but hid the wrong ones? Comment below what you'd have done. I really want to know. Because when I said goodbye to Marcus that morning, I didn't realize I was waving to a stranger. He kissed my forehead, held me a little too tight, and whispered, "It's just 2 years, Lena. I'll come back before you even miss me." I smiled, trying to believe it. But something in his eyes, a flicker, a hesitation, made me shiver. As the taxi drove away, I stood on our porch with the wind tugging at my robe, watching him disappear down the street. I didn't know that this was the last version of Marcus I'd ever recognize. And as the photo frame caught the morning light, I whispered to myself, 2 years isn't forever, right? The first month without Marcus was a blur of calls, check-ins, and blurry video chats that froze mid-laugh. He'd tell me about the snow, the long work hours, the quiet nights. I'd tell him about Jace's soccer games, my new night shifts, and how the sink still leaked no matter how tight I turned the handle. At first, it felt like we were surviving the distance. But somewhere around month 3, his calls grew shorter. His texts, vaguer. "Sorry, babe, long day. Can't talk, out with the crew. We'll call tomorrow." And tomorrow stopped coming. Have you ever tried to love someone who was fading away one message at a time? It's like trying to hold water in your hands. No matter how hard you try, it slips through your fingers. Jace would ask, "When's Dad coming home?" And I'd say, "Soon." But the truth was, I didn't know. Our wedding anniversary came and went. I baked his favorite pie, the one with too much cinnamon, and set 2 plates anyway. I laughed at myself when the second slice went cold. That night, I sent him a picture, a simple "wish you were here." He replied 2 days later, "Looks great, babe." No heart. No warmth. Just polite distance. I started noticing things, small things. His tone was off. He stopped asking about Jace's grades. He didn't mention the weather or the people he worked with anymore. His stories stopped sounding like his. One night, I called after my shift. The line picked up, but he didn't speak right away. I heard soft music playing in the background, not the kind he liked. Then, a woman's voice, faint, laughing. "Marcus?" I said. He cleared his throat. "Sorry, bad signal. I'll call you back." He didn't. The next few weeks were filled with apologies, excuses, and promises that didn't match his eyes during our video calls. He'd look distracted, nervous even. And when I asked what was wrong, he'd smile and say, "You worry too much." Maybe I did. Or maybe I just knew what denial felt like. I tried to convince myself it was loneliness playing tricks. But one night, while cleaning Jace's room, I saw a notification flash on my husband's tablet, the one synced to his messages. A text. From a number I didn't recognize. The preview read, "Can't wait to see you again, babe. Little Leah misses you." I froze, staring at that name. Leah. The text wasn't meant for me. My hands trembled as I opened it. There it was, a picture of a woman holding a baby, smiling. Marcus's reply sat just below it, "Tell my girls I love them. I'll be back soon." I felt my heart pound in my chest, heavy and hollow at the same time. My husband didn't just have a secret. He had a second life. That night, as Jay slept peacefully down the hall, I sat in the dark with his tablet glowing in my lap, whispering the only question that made sense anymore. "Whose? Leah? Would you have checked the messages too, or walked away right then? Tell me in the comments. Because from this moment on, nothing in my marriage would ever look the same again." It had been 19 months since Marcus left. 19 months of voice messages, broken promises, and long nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if love could survive silence. By then, I'd stopped waiting for miracles. I worked double shifts, packed Jace's lunches, fixed the dripping sink myself, and learned to smile in pictures even when it felt forced. My world had grown smaller but stronger, me, my son, and the quiet peace that came from lowering expectations. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID said Marcus Grant. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. "Marcus?" His voice came through, calm, almost casual. "Hey, Lena. I'm coming home." Those 4 words erased every sleepless night in an instant. I didn't ask how long he'd stay or why now, I just felt the tears before they came. Jace ran into the kitchen, eyes wide. "Is it Dad? Is he coming?" I nodded, barely able to speak. That week, I became a woman on a mission. I scrubbed the floors until the wood gleamed, bought new curtains, even repainted the front porch where we'd first shared a kiss. I wanted him to walk through that door and see the home we built still standing, proof that I'd kept my promise. Every evening, I cooked something special, his favorites, honey barbecue ribs, peach cobbler, collard greens. I even bought the same cologne he used to wear and sprayed a little on his pillow, like the scent could bring him closer. Jay spent hours drawing a giant "Welcome Home Dad" banner. His handwriting was uneven, but the love behind it made it perfect. We hung it right above the fireplace, the one Marcus built before he left. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made my heart race. Was that a car door? A footstep? My mind replayed his voice, "I'm coming home." I imagined the moment, the door opening, his bags hitting the floor, his arms around me again. I thought of how I'd forgive him quietly, how we'd rebuild. Because love, when it's deep, doesn't die easily. When the next evening finally came, I set the table for 3, candles, napkins folded just right, the good plates we only used on anniversaries. The smell of roasted chicken filled the house. The clock ticked past 7. Then 8. then 9. Just when I started to worry, headlights swept across the living room wall. Jace jumped up. He's here. My heart pounded as I straightened my dress and fixed my hair. I wanted to look like the woman he left, not the one who had learned to live without him. Outside, an engine idled. Then I heard it, laughter. 2 voices. One deep. One soft. Feminine. My smile faded. I looked through the curtain, his silhouette stepped out first, tall and familiar. Then, from the passenger side, a woman emerged. She was holding something, no, someone. A baby. My stomach tightened. Jace tugged my sleeve. Mom? Who's that? I couldn't answer. My throat closed around words I didn't have. The porch light flickered as the sound of footsteps grew closer. Whatever truth waited outside that door, it was about to change everything. Would you have opened the door right then, or pretended not to be home? Tell me in the comments, because what I saw next, no heart could truly prepare for. The knock came softly, 3 taps, spaced out, almost cautious. I stood still for a moment, my hand hovering above the doorknob. The smell of the dinner I'd made, the ribs, the cobbler, filled the room, mocking the warmth I'd tried to recreate. When I finally opened the door, Marcus stood there. He looked older, a few gray strands, a heavier stare, but still had that same easy smile he used to melt tension. Except this time, it didn't work. Beside him stood a young woman, maybe mid-20s, skin pale against the red coat she wore. Her hair was damp from the drizzle, her arms wrapped protectively around a baby girl. The child stirred, a soft cry breaking the silence. For a second, no one spoke. Then Marcus said, "Selena, we're home." The word we hit harder than a slap. I blinked slowly, studying them, the woman, the baby, the man who used to call me his peace. Jace stood behind me, his small voice trembling. "Dad?" Marcus smiled weakly. "Hey, champ." He tried to step forward, but I didn't move. Behind us, the lights flickered from the open door, casting long shadows. Neighbors peeked through their curtains. The sound of a dog barking in the distance filled the awkward space where love used to live. The young woman spoke then, voice soft but steady. "I'm Liana." I looked at her, not with anger, but with eerie calm. "I know," I said quietly. Marcus shifted uneasily. "Lena, I can explain," I raised my hand. "Don't." He looked confused, maybe even relieved that I wasn't shouting. But inside, something colder had taken root, not rage, not heartbreak, just clarity. I stepped aside, letting them in. The air between us felt thick enough to choke on. Marcus carried his bag, Liana rocked the baby gently, eyes darting across the living room. She noticed the banner, "Welcome home, Dad," and her face fell. No one spoke for a long time. The clock ticked too loudly, the food on the table went untouched. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat. "I didn't plan for it to happen like this." My voice came out calm, level. "You mean, at all?" He swallowed. "Leah and I met at work. Things got complicated. The baby, she's 6 months old now. I couldn't just leave them." The baby whimpered, and Liana whispered something to soothe her. Jace looked up at me, confused and scared. "Mom, is she staying with us?" I knelt down, meeting his eyes. "It's okay, baby. Go to your room for now." He hesitated, then obeyed. The moment his door closed, the silence returned, sharper than before. Marcus rubbed his temples. "I know this is hard, but I'm trying to do the right thing." I studied him, really studied him, the way he avoided my eyes, the way guilt sat on his shoulders. And for the first time in years, I realized something: I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of losing myself trying to understand him. I walked to the table, blew out the candles, and covered the food with foil. Then I turned to him and said, softly, "You should feed your family. They must be hungry from the trip." His expression flickered, confusion mixed with shame. I smiled. It wasn't bitterness or sarcasm. It was survival. Because if I didn't smile, I'd break. Would you have reacted calmly, or let your anger speak first? Comment your thoughts below. Because sometimes silence doesn't mean weakness, it means strategy. As I walked down the hallway that night, past the photo frame I'd dusted every Sunday, I caught my reflection in the glass. I didn't see a broken woman. I saw one who had just learned the difference between waiting for love and waiting for truth. It started with a sentence that didn't sound like a request. Marcus said, "She has nowhere to go." That was how Liana and her baby ended up staying for a few nights. Then a week. Then, suddenly, indefinitely. I told myself I was doing it for Jace, that he didn't need to see his mother explode or beg. But inside, I was unraveling. Slowly. Quietly. Like a rope stretched too thin. At first, Liana stayed in the guest room. She kept her distance, always polite. But soon, her things began to migrate: a hairbrush on the bathroom sink, bottles of baby lotion beside the mirror, folded baby clothes drying by the window. Every object was a whisper, "You've been replaced." Jace asked the question I'd been avoiding one evening as I tucked him in. "Mom," he said, "is that my baby brother?" I felt my chest tighten. "No, sweetheart," I said softly, forcing a smile. "She's your dad's friend's baby." He frowned. "But Dad holds her like he used to hold me." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the moonlight stretch across the photo frame on my nightstand. The one Marcus gave me on our anniversary. The one I dusted every Sunday. Now, it was covered in a thin film of dust, untouched, like something sacred that no longer belonged to me. I stopped cleaning it. Maybe I wanted to see how long it would take before he noticed. He never did. The house grew quieter, but not peaceful. Liana's laughter filled the kitchen in the mornings. The baby's cries echoed through the hallway at night. I learned to sleep with headphones, pretending the world beyond my bedroom didn't exist. Neighbors noticed. They always do. Mrs. Pruitt from next door stopped waving. The mailman's smile turned awkward. People whispered when I walked past, not out of cruelty, but curiosity. In a small town, rumors grow faster than weeds. One afternoon, I saw Marcus fixing something under Liana's car hood. She stood beside him, laughing at something he said. They looked like a couple in a commercial: sunlight, smiles, everything I used to believe in. I wanted to scream. To throw the photo frame at the wall. To demand the respect I'd earned through loyalty and sacrifice. But instead, I said nothing. Because if pain had taught me anything, it was this: sometimes silence speaks louder than 1,000 arguments. Still, silence has its cost. My sleep became restless. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and just sit in the dark, counting the hours between who I was and who I'd become. My mind kept replaying the day Marcus left for Alaska, how sure I was that love could survive distance. Now, I was living with a stranger who wore my husband's face. A month passed. Liana's name began showing up on grocery receipts, on packages, on little notes by the fridge. Marcus still used "we" when talking about them. Never you and me. Always we. One evening, as I went through the mail, I noticed an envelope from our mortgage company. It had Marcus's name printed on it. Nothing unusual. Until I saw the bold red letters, "Urgent account update." I tore it open. The letter inside was short, cold, official. It said, "This notice confirms the recent loan modification on your property, signed by Mr. Marcus Grant." Signed. By Marcus. Except, the signature wasn't his handwriting. I knew it like I knew my own pulse. Someone had forged it. My stomach dropped. I flipped the page. There was a withdrawal note. A large sum of money had been moved from our joint account. The document had 2 signatures, his and mine. Only, I had never signed a thing. My hands trembled as the realization sank in: this wasn't just betrayal of the heart anymore. It was betrayal of my name. My future. My home. I sat there for a long time, the paper heavy in my hands. Outside, I heard them laughing again, Marcus, Liana, and the baby. Inside, something in me went silent. Dead silent. What would you do if someone stole your piece, and your signature? Tell me in the comments, because that night, I decided I'd never cry over him again. The next morning, I woke up different. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Just empty, like grief had burned itself out and left nothing but ash. I got out of bed, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table while the baby cried in the other room. Liana rushed past me, flustered, apologizing. I just nodded. No words. Marcus came down minutes later, tie in hand, pretending we were still a family. He said, "You okay?" I smiled. Perfect. He looked thrown off. Maybe he expected the usual, tears, questions, confrontation. But something in me had shifted overnight. I was done trying to be understood. Instead, I began observing every move, every pattern. I watched how they interacted, what they whispered about, when they disappeared for hours. And at night, instead of crying, I wrote. It started as scattered thoughts in a journal. Just scribbles of confusion and anger. Then it became something else, a record. Dates, times, amounts, copies of messages, photos of documents. I was building something without saying a word. Because silence isn't weakness. It's preparation. I stopped arguing with Marcus altogether. If he came home late, I didn't ask where he'd been. When he said, "Liana's staying a little longer," I just nodded. It unnerved him. He'd look at me and say, "You're acting strange, Selena." And I'd reply softly, "Maybe I've finally accepted things." He didn't know what that meant, and that's what made it powerful. The photo frame, the one gathering dust for weeks, I picked it up one morning. Wiped it clean. Then turned it face down. It wasn't anger. It was closure. That gesture, simple, quiet, felt like reclaiming my own voice. The symbol of love became the symbol of detachment. I started dressing differently. Brighter colors, hair done, lipstick on. Not for him, not for attention, for me. For the woman who forgot she existed beneath the role of wife. At work, my patients noticed. "You look lighter," one of them said. I smiled. Maybe I finally learned that peace doesn't mean pretending. Marcus started getting nervous. The more silent I became, the more restless he grew. He'd ask, "Are you mad at me?" I'd shrug. "No, Marcus. I'm just done explaining myself." He didn't understand that the most dangerous person is the one who no longer needs validation. I stopped waiting for apologies. I stopped waiting for love to return. All I did was watch, quietly, carefully. Because if he could rebuild a life in silence, so could I. Would you have stayed calm, or packed your things and left that day? Comment below. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't noise, it's transformation. People talk in small towns, not because they're cruel, but because silence makes them nervous. Everywhere I went, I felt the whispers crawl behind me. "Poor Selena," I heard once at the grocery store. "She still lets them live there," someone replied, half pity, half disbelief. I didn't look their way. Pity was just another kind of poison. Back home, Liana had started playing housewife. She cooked breakfast, folded laundry, even hummed in the kitchen, like she'd earned the right to make the walls echo with her voice. I'd come home from a long shift at the hospital and see her sitting on my couch, feeding her baby while Marcus rubbed her shoulder. No words could describe the chill that settled in those moments. But I'd smile anyway. Because every smile had a calculation. What Marcus didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I'd stopped sleeping aimlessly. Now, every night, after they went to bed, I sat by my desk lamp gathering evidence. Bank statements. Receipts. Copies of the forged mortgage papers. Screenshots of transactions I never made. My hand shook at first. But the more I uncovered, the steadier I became. Then, one night, something caught my eye, a file in Marcus's drawer, marked Property, Grant Estate. I recognized the name immediately. It was my late mother's land, 20 acres she'd left me in her will, her last gift before cancer took her. I opened the file, and my heart dropped. He'd sold it. Without asking. Without telling me. Without a single signature from my hand. I read the line 3 times before my brain could even accept it. Signed by both parties, Marcus and Selena Grant. That same forged scrawl again. The same shape of deceit. That land was more than dirt and trees, it was the only thing my mother had ever truly owned. And now it was gone. I pressed my palm against my chest. It wasn't heartbreak this time. It was fury, the quiet, heavy kind that doesn't scream. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. Instead, I gathered everything into a folder and slipped it into my purse. The next afternoon, I visited someone I hadn't seen in years, my old friend Nora, a lawyer who used to live 2 streets over. When I walked into her office, she looked up and smiled, until she saw my face. "Selena," she said, standing. "What's wrong?" I placed the folder on her desk. "I need you to read this." She flipped through the pages. Her smile faded. Her eyes moved faster. Then slower. Finally, she looked at me, and they widened. "Selena, do you realize what this means?" I stayed quiet. My heart thudded once, twice. "Tell me." "This isn't just forgery," she whispered. "It's fraud. If you wanted to, you could take everything back, the house, the money, the land. He could lose it all." Her words hung in the air like thunder waiting to break. Everything back. I looked down at my hands, at the faint line of a wedding ring that I hadn't removed yet. "I don't want everything," I said softly. "I just want what's mine." Nora leaned back, still staring at me. "Then you need to move quietly. Collect everything. Every proof. Every signature. You're sitting on the kind of truth that burns lives down." I nodded, my pulse steady now. For the first time, I felt something close to control. "Would you tell him if you were in my shoes? Or would you wait, like I did, until the moment it hurts most? Tell me in the comments, because this next move? It changes everything." Marcus always loved appearances. He could be falling apart inside, but as long as people thought we were perfect, he could breathe. So, one Friday evening, he decided to host a dinner. He called up his friends from work, told them, "Selena's been amazing through everything. We're moving forward as a family." Family. That word hit like a blade dipped in sugar. I didn't protest. Instead, I ironed the tablecloth, set the good plates, and baked his favorite lemon pie. If he wanted a show, I'd give him one they'd never forget. When the guests arrived, the house looked like the old days, soft music, candles, laughter echoing through the hallway. Except now, there were 3 kinds of smiles in the room, mine, practiced. Liana's, nervous. Marcus's, desperate. Dinner started light. Stories about Alaska, old projects, memories of Jace as a toddler. Then came the moment tension always finds its way to. Liana leaned back in her chair, glass of wine in hand, and said with a half-laugh, "It's amazing, really. The way love changes. Modern relationships are all about forgiveness, aren't they?" Her tone was sweet, but the sting underneath was deliberate. Everyone looked at me. I dabbed my lips with a napkin, met her eyes, and smiled. "Forgiveness," I said quietly, "isn't permission. It's release." The table fell silent. Even the baby monitor in the next room hummed in stillness. Marcus's smile froze. His fork hovered midair. One of the guests coughed softly, trying to break the tension. "Well, that's deep." I nodded. "It should be." Marcus tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "Selena, let's not make this dramatic." I cut him off, still calm. Dramatic? No, Marcus. Drama is pretending a wound doesn't bleed just because you covered it with a napkin. He went pale. Liana shifted uncomfortably. The guests exchanged glances, unsure whether to stay or leave. So, I smiled again and raised my glass. To new beginnings, I said. The others repeated the toast, their voices uneven, confused. But I didn't care. I wasn't raising that glass to them, I was raising it to the woman I'd finally met in the mirror. After everyone left, the house felt thick with unspoken words. Marcus followed me into the kitchen, voice low. What was that? Dinner, I said simply. The one you wanted. You embarrassed me. No, I said, meeting his eyes. You did that yourself. He stepped closer, anger rising. You think you're smarter than me now? I didn't flinch. No, Marcus. I've always been smart. I just stopped using it to protect you. That night, Jace found me sitting in the backyard, staring at the stars. He climbed into my lap, quiet for a moment. Then he whispered, Mom, I'm proud of you. I felt my throat tighten. Why, baby? Because you don't cry anymore. I wrapped my arms around him, tears burning but never falling. Because he was right. I didn't cry anymore. And that was my quiet victory. Would you have spoken up at that dinner table, or kept pretending for peace? Tell me in the comments. Because sometimes, silence ends wars, but truth starts revolutions. Freedom doesn't come with fireworks. It begins quietly, like the click of a lock you no longer plan to use. After that dinner, something inside me finally settled. The war wasn't over, but I stopped fighting it on his terms. I started preparing on mine. Every morning before work, I sat by the kitchen counter with my laptop open, pretending to pay bills. What I was really doing was moving small amounts of money, 50 here, 100 there, into a new account I'd opened under my maiden name, Selena Morris. Nothing suspicious. Nothing large enough to draw attention. Just steady drops in a bucket that would one day become an ocean between us. I made sure the mail from that account went to a post office box in the next town. No paper trail at home. No digital alerts to his phone. Marcus thought I was too soft to plan anything. That was his favorite mistake. At work, during lunch breaks, I started updating my nursing license for a different state, North Carolina. A quiet place, 4 hours from Savannah, where the hospital had good benefits and where no one knew me as Marcus Grant's wife. It wasn't just escape I was building, it was resurrection. Jace didn't know the details, but kids are sharper than we think. One evening, he came into my room with his sketchbook and asked, Mom, are we moving? I paused, unsure whether to tell him the truth. Why do you ask? Because you smile when you pack things now, he said. I smiled wider. Maybe one day. Somewhere peaceful. That night, while he slept, I reached out to an old colleague from the hospital, a therapist named Dr. Avery. She was someone I trusted, someone who never asked questions she wasn't supposed to. I need a quiet favor, I said over the phone. For Jace. She agreed instantly. We set up sessions at her private office under the guise of after-school tutoring. Marcus never noticed. He didn't notice much anymore, except the mirror of his own reflection. Meanwhile, tension in the house was shifting like a storm you could hear before it arrived. Liana's perfect smile began to crack. At first, it was small, she stopped humming while she cooked. Then she started snapping at Marcus over small things. His phone. His late nights. The way he always left the baby's formula for her to handle. One night, I overheard them arguing through the wall. You said you'd take care of us, she hissed. I am taking care of you, Marcus shot back. Then why is your wife still here? Silence. Then a sound, something breaking. I sat in my room, calm as the moonlight on the floor. Their voices rose and fell until it all went quiet again. It hit me that for the first time in years, I wasn't the one crying behind that wall. The next morning, Marcus tried to act normal. He made coffee, forced a smile. But his eyes gave him away, bloodshot, restless, paranoid. He asked, "Selena, you've been quiet lately. Are we okay?" I looked at him and said the most honest thing I could. "We're exactly where we need to be." He didn't understand it, but I did. Every piece was moving. Every plan was forming. Still, something about Liana's behavior gnawed at me. She'd started taking secret calls outside, speaking in low tones, pacing by the mailbox. Sometimes she'd come home with expensive perfume or a new bracelet, things Marcus couldn't have afforded right now. One night, I followed her car after she said she was going to pick up formula. She didn't go to the store. She parked at a hotel near the interstate. She stayed for an hour. When she returned, I was sitting in the dark living room, pretending to scroll through my phone. "Long trip for baby milk," I said casually. She stiffened. "They were out of the brand he likes." "Right," I said softly. "That must be hard, keeping everyone happy." She didn't reply. She just walked upstairs without another word. Something in her eyes had changed, not guilt, but fear. Days later, while at work, I received an anonymous text from an unknown number. "She's not who he says she is." I stared at the screen, heartbeat rising. Before I could reply, another message appeared. "Check the hotel registry. Room 214. Then nothing else. No name. No context. For a moment, I wondered if someone was playing a cruel joke. But deep down, something told me it wasn't random. I printed the messages, folded them neatly, and tucked them into the same folder that held all my evidence, my quiet book of truth. That night, I didn't confront anyone. I didn't question Marcus. I didn't even look at Liana. I just watched her feed her baby at the table, her hand shaking slightly as she lifted the bottle. It wasn't guilt that made her tremble, it was the awareness that someone finally saw her. Have you ever kept a secret so dangerous it made your heartbeat sound like thunder? Would you have gone to that hotel, or waited, like I did, to see who walked through that door first? Comment your thoughts. Sometimes, truth doesn't arrive like lightning. It drips in, slow, deliberate, until you're standing in a flood you can't ignore. That night after the anonymous message, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the floor sounded like a secret trying to tell me something. By morning, I decided to find out who sent it. It was a Wednesday, gray skies, the kind that make every sound feel heavier. I left work early and drove to a small cafe on the edge of town, the one with peeling blue paint and the smell of burnt coffee. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting near the window, hands wrapped around a chipped mug. "Ava?" I asked. She looked up, mid-30s maybe, tired eyes but strong posture. There was something familiar in her stillness, that quiet endurance only women who've been through storms recognize in each other. "You must be Selena," she said. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure either," I admitted, sitting across from her. "You said you know Liana?" She took a slow sip of her coffee, eyes flicking toward the window before she spoke. "I don't just know her," she said. "I was her, before you were." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Ava opened her purse and slid a small envelope across the table. Inside were photographs, Marcus and Ava, smiling at a marina, holding hands in front of a moving truck. "He told me we'd start a business together," she said. "I put my savings into his account. Then one morning, he disappeared. New number. New address. Gone." I stared at the photos, recognizing the same grin, the same confidence I once mistook for sincerity. "How long ago?" I whispered. 6 years before he met you." Ava leaned forward. "I tracked him for a while. Thought maybe he'd been hurt. Then I saw a wedding announcement, your wedding." I swallowed hard. The air in the cafe suddenly felt thin. "Marcus," she continued, "has a pattern. He finds women with stability. Nurses, teachers, small business owners, women who build things. Then he uses them to rebuild himself. When they're drained, he moves on to the next. I didn't interrupt. I couldn't. Every word was a blade slicing through the illusions I'd been living under. She reached for her bag again, pulling out printouts, property records, transaction screenshots, old business filings. This, she said, is his trail. Every address, every woman, every lie. I stared at the papers, feeling the same kind of nausea that comes from realizing you've been living in a house built on sand. In one document, I saw my own signature, or what I thought was mine. It had been copied from an old mortgage file. That was the moment my sadness turned to something colder, precision. I took a deep breath and asked, "Why tell me this now?" Ava's eyes softened. "Because I saw your son's picture on his Facebook. The boy looks kind. You still have a chance to get out before he ruins everything." I nodded slowly. For years, I thought silence was weakness. That holding my tongue was surrender. But sitting across from Ava, I realized silence could also be strategy, a shield, a seed, a weapon that grows quietly until it blooms into truth. I didn't cry. Not this time. I asked for copies of everything she had. When she handed me the folder, our hands brushed, and for a brief second, it felt like two soldiers exchanging maps of the same battlefield. Before we parted, she said something that stayed with me: "Men like him don't destroy women. They teach them what kind of women they were always meant to be." Over the next few days, I started connecting the dots. Every time Marcus changed jobs, it coincided with one of those names on Ava's list. Every new investment matched a sudden withdrawal from my joint account. And every time he said, "Trust me," there was always a document I hadn't seen. At night, after Jace went to bed, I'd sit at my desk sorting through evidence like a detective of my own heartbreak. Sometimes I caught myself whispering, "You thought I'd never look, didn't you?" In the corner of the room, that old photo frame sat face down, the one I'd turned weeks ago. Now it wasn't just a symbol of endings. It was my proof that once love dies, it leaves behind clarity. I had a dozen chances to confront Marcus. Every dinner. Every lie he told with ease. But I stayed quiet, patient. Because you don't destroy a man like Marcus by shouting. You destroy him by letting truth speak in silence. So I smiled through his apologies. I let him believe I was healing. He told me, "You've been strong through all this." And I replied, "You have no idea how strong." Liana, meanwhile, was unraveling fast. She'd stopped leaving the house. She avoided eye contact, as if she already sensed the truth circling her like smoke. One evening, I saw her on the porch, holding the baby and staring into the distance. Her lips moved, whispering something I couldn't hear. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered, she walked into my home knowing exactly who I was. Later that week, I drove to the ocean. Parked near the dunes where Marcus once promised me forever. The wind smelled like salt and endings. I stood there for a long time, watching the tide pull back, then roll forward again. That's when it hit me: healing isn't about forgetting who broke you. It's about remembering yourself before they did. I took out my journal, the one I'd been writing in since chapter 6, and wrote a single line. I am no longer waiting for peace. I'm building it. When I got home, I placed Ava's folder in the same hidden drawer as the rest of my evidence. And that night, I slept soundly for the first time in years. Because now, I wasn't afraid of Marcus discovering the truth. I was waiting for him to. If you were in Selena's shoes, would you confront Marcus now or let the truth expose itself? Justice doesn't start in a courtroom. It starts in silence, in the small moments when you choose what to let go of, and what to hold on to. That week, I decided to hold on. My mornings still looked the same: coffee, work, school drop-offs, quiet dinners. But underneath that routine, I was building something invisible. Every night after Jace went to bed, I pulled out folders from their hiding places, in the laundry cabinet, under the floorboard in the hall, behind the photo albums no one touched anymore. Bank statements. Land deeds. Emails. Even old voicemails Marcus had left on my phone, where his arrogance dripped between every word. One by one, I sorted them by date, by lie, by intent. It felt surgical, like operating on the corpse of a marriage. The deeper I went, the clearer the pattern became. Marcus had been moving money through dummy accounts tied to his old company. Some were under Liana's name, others under his. And the land he'd sold without my permission? He'd transferred it to a joint trust that didn't include me at all. I wasn't just living with a cheater. I was living with a thief. On Thursday, I met Harold, the lawyer I'd known since nursing school. He'd been my study partner back when life still felt predictable. Now he looked at me across his mahogany desk, brows furrowed as he flipped through the evidence I brought. When he finally looked up, his voice was low but firm. "Selena, this isn't just infidelity. This is fraud." I nodded slowly. "So I'm not crazy?" He shook his head. "No. You're incredibly patient." He leaned back in his chair and sighed. "You have two kinds of power, the law, and your silence. Use both wisely." Those words stayed with me. At home, the air felt heavier, not because of tension, but because I was no longer afraid of it. Marcus walked around with that same false confidence, cracking jokes at dinner, pretending everything was normal. Liana, though, she'd changed. Her laughter had a nervous edge now. She'd glance at me when she thought I wasn't looking, eyes filled with suspicion. One evening, as I washed the dishes, she hovered by the counter, pretending to check her phone. "Selena," she said suddenly, "you've been quiet lately." I didn't look up. Quiet people see more. She hesitated. "Are you planning something?" I turned, drying my hands on a towel, smiling just enough to unsettle her. "Liana, I've been planning my life for years. You're just seeing it now." She blinked, flustered. Marcus overheard from the living room and laughed. "Relax, babe. Selena's not that deep." I smiled at that, a calm, chilling kind of smile. Because when a man underestimates you, you've already won half the war. For 3 nights straight, I couldn't stop thinking about Harold's advice. Silence, and the law. I had both. But which one should speak first? The next morning, I made my choice. I printed out a selection of the most damning evidence, just enough to draw attention, but not enough to reveal my full hand. Then I wrote a short and signed note. "In case something happens to me, these documents explain everything. SG." I sealed them in a thick brown envelope, addressed it carefully, and walked it down to the post office. The clerk smiled as she stamped it, unaware she was handling the first move of a silent war. As I slipped it into the outgoing mail bin, my heart pounded not with fear, but with freedom. Back home, I found Marcus watching TV, a half-empty beer can on the table. He glanced up lazily. "Where you been?" "Just errands," I said. He nodded without suspicion. The kind of man who always assumes control is permanent, until it isn't. That night, I cooked dinner like normal. Liana joined us, holding the baby. Jace told us about a science project. And there I was, sitting at the same table where love once lived, surrounded by the ghosts of promises broken. But now, I wasn't broken. I was preparing for peace. After dinner, I tucked Jason to bed. He looked up at me sleepily. "Mom, are we gonna move soon?" I brushed his hair back and smiled. "Why do you ask that?" "Because you've been cleaning your desk a lot lately. You only do that when something big's coming. Children always know. Even when we think they don't." I kissed his forehead. "You're very smart, Jace." He smiled. "Just like you." The following weekend, Liana's paranoia bloomed into arguments. She questioned Marcus constantly, where he went, who he called, why he still talked to me. I watched from the sidelines, calm as glass. At one point, she shouted, "She's planning something, Marcus. I can feel it." He laughed again, dismissive, the way he always did. "She's a nurse, Liana. Not a mastermind." I turned my head slightly and caught her eye, that same faint smile again. She saw it this time. And she shivered. Later that night, I walked into the living room alone. The photo frame, that old symbol of love, still lay face down on the mantel. I picked it up, wiped the dust, and flipped it upright for the first time in months. The picture inside was from happier days, our wedding in Savannah, sunlight hitting my veil just right, Marcus smiling like a man who thought he'd won the world. I looked at it for a long moment, then whispered, "You built your empire on my heart. Now you'll watch it crumble, one quiet truth at a time." Then I placed the frame back down, not face first this time, but standing. Not as a memory. As evidence. The next morning, the mail truck rolled down the street. Through the kitchen window, I watched the carrier pull into our driveway, place envelopes in the box, then drive away. Marcus walked out moments later, still in his work clothes. He flipped through the mail, tossing bills and flyers aside. Then he froze. There was a thick manila envelope, addressed to him. He frowned, opening it right there on the porch. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the color drain from his face. Liana stepped out behind him, holding the baby. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the papers, his own secrets staring back. And inside the house, I poured myself a cup of coffee, steady hands, calm smile. Because I knew one thing for sure, the envelope I mailed wasn't that one. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They're the ones who already decided how your story ends. So tell me, what would you have done? Would you warn Marcus, or watch him fall? Some houses don't collapse because of storms. They collapse because of lies, layer after layer, heavy as bricks. And when truth finally cracks the walls, it doesn't whisper. It roars. It started with a phone call Marcus didn't expect. He was in the kitchen, half-dressed, juggling his phone and a mug of coffee. I was at the counter, quietly buttering toast for Jace. Then I heard it, the sudden shift in his tone. From confidence, to panic. "What do you mean the buyer backed out?" he snapped. Pause. "What? No, the deed's legit, I have the documents." He stormed out to the patio, voice rising. Liana followed him, baby on her hip, eyes wide. From inside, I could still hear pieces of the conversation, fake title, they traced the trust, can't be serious. I kept spreading butter, calm as ever. Because I already knew what was happening. The deal he'd been working on, the land sale that would set us all up, had been built on falsified ownership records. The buyer had done a background check. The trust Marcus forged had his name tied to transactions he couldn't legally prove. And now, it was unraveling. By noon, the calls wouldn't stop. Marcus's voice echoed through the house, bouncing off every wall, anger, denial, fear. He slammed his phone down at the table. "They froze my accounts." Liana blinked. "What do you mean froze?" "I mean I can't access a damn thing. Not the trust fund, not my savings, nothing." I turned from the sink, wiping my hands calmly. "You sound surprised." He glared at me, veins rising in his neck. "You did something, didn't you?" I smiled softly. "I didn't do anything, Marcus. Truth did." He laughed bitterly. "You think this is funny? You think you're better than me?" I shrugged. "No. I just stopped believing you." Liana's mask cracked first. Her voice shook. "You said it was all legal. You said I was safe." He turned on her, raw and defensive. "Don't start. You knew what this was." "No, I didn't." I thought. She stopped, eyes darting toward me, then back at him. "You used me too, didn't you?" The silence after that sentence was suffocating. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She stepped back, clutching the baby tighter, her face pale. "You're worse than I thought." Then she whispered something I'll never forget. "I should have listened when people warned me about men who smile too easily." And with that, she walked upstairs, trembling. The chaos around me felt distant, like watching a storm through glass. I moved through the day with quiet precision, answering Jace's homework questions, preparing dinner, writing in my journal. Because in the background, my lawyer Harold had already filed 2 documents that morning. Petition for legal separation. Motion for asset recovery and fraud investigation. No shouting. No spectacle. Just paperwork, the quiet kind of justice. I knew Marcus would learn soon enough. That evening, Marcus sat in the living room, shoulders heavy. His phone buzzed non-stop, business partners, investors, people demanding answers. Jace walked in, holding his school notebook. He looked at his father for a long moment before saying softly, "Dad, you always told me truth builds strong foundations." Marcus rubbed his forehead. "Not now, Jace." But my son didn't move. He stood there, calm, collected, 10 years old but somehow wiser than his father. Then he said it, the line that split the air clean in two. "Now you know what truth feels like." Marcus froze, eyes wet but unblinking. Jace turned and walked upstairs. And I sat there quietly, the weight of that sentence settling like dust. The next morning, whispers spread faster than the news itself. Neighbors who once waved politely now stared from their porches. The local real estate circle buzzed with gossip. Marcus Grant's license is under review. Someone said the DA's office got involved. His wife? Oh, she's still in the house, calm as ice. I didn't confirm anything. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence says more than any headline. That afternoon, Marcus cornered me in the hallway. His eyes were red, voice rough. "Tell me what you did," he said through gritted teeth. "I told the truth," I replied simply. He stepped closer. "You ruined my life." I looked up at him, my tone steady. "No, Marcus. You ruined mine first. I just stopped pretending it didn't hurt." He exhaled shakily, then pressed his palms against the wall, leaning over me. "I loved you once," he muttered. I met his gaze. "Then you should have protected what you loved." For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. Just silence, the kind that sounded a lot like regret. Later that evening, Marcus's phone rang again. This time, he didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his face drained of color. He turned to me, eyes wide. "It's the police," he whispered. I said nothing, just watched. He paced the room as he spoke. "What?" "No, I can explain." I didn't. "Look, those documents were signed under legal authority. Yes, I'll come in tomorrow morning." When he hung up, his hands were shaking. "What did they say?" I asked. They want to talk about the land sale. Someone reported irregularities." I tilted my head. "Irregularities?" His voice cracked. "They think I forged the deed." I nodded slowly, like the idea had just dawned on me. "Then maybe you should tell them the truth." That night, after Jace went to bed, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The moonlight poured in, pale and soft, touching the photo frame on the mantel, still standing, no longer hidden. Outside, the sound of tires on gravel broke the quiet. Headlights cut through the curtains, glowing blue and red. Marcus stood from the couch, face pale. What's that?" The sound of car doors. 2 voices outside. A knock at the door. He turned to me, trembling. "Selena, what did you do?" I met his gaze, expression unreadable. "Me?" I said softly. "Nothing you didn't start." The knock came again, louder this time. Marcus hesitated, then walked toward the door. When he opened it, the badge flashed in the porch light. "Mr. Marcus Grant?" His voice barely came out. "Yes." The officer's tone was calm, professional. "Sir, we'd like to ask you a few questions down at the station." Behind him, another officer stepped forward, holding a folder. The same folder I'd once sealed with quiet hands. Marcus turned to me one last time, disbelief, regret, and exhaustion mixing into one haunted look. I didn't move. And as they led him out into the night, Jace's bedroom light flicked on upstairs. A small silhouette stood by the window, watching. Because even children know when a house of lies finally falls. Truth doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door open. Would you have warned him? Or let the truth do its work? Some storms don't begin with thunder. They begin with a signature. A single forged name that drags a man's world into ruin. That's how Marcus's empire fell, not with noise, but with paper. The house felt too quiet. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Marcus didn't come home that night. When I walked into the living room the next morning, his coffee mug was still on the counter, half filled, cold. Jay sat on the couch, knees pulled close, watching the news without really watching it. The screen showed headlines flashing across the bottom. Local realtor under investigation for property fraud. Marcus Grant accused of forgery, possible embezzlement. The anchor's voice was calm, detached. But the name echoed in my chest like a drum. Marcus Grant. My husband. My past. 2 detectives came by that afternoon. Polite, professional. They asked questions I'd been expecting for months. When they finished, one of them, a woman with tired eyes, paused by the doorway. Mrs. Grant, she said quietly, I've seen a lot of cases. But I'll tell you this, you handled this one smart. I didn't answer. I just nodded. Because this wasn't victory. It was release. When Marcus was finally released on bail, he came home looking nothing like the man who once carried himself like a king. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes sunken, his voice stripped of confidence. He stood in the doorway like a ghost who no longer recognized the house he built. Liana appeared at the top of the stairs, trembling. Marcus, what did you do? He swallowed hard. It's not as bad as it looks. They're exaggerating. The paperwork, it was just a mistake. A mistake, she said, stepping closer. They said you forged deeds. You stole money from people. He shook his head wildly. I didn't steal. I just shifted things around. It was all for us, Liana. For our future. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She turned, tears streaking down her face. Our future, she whispered. You mean your greed? That same week, Marcus learned that his old lawyer, the one who used to draft his deals and hide his tracks, now represented me. Harold Winters. The man Marcus once bragged could make any mess disappear. Now, Harold sat across from me in a quiet office downtown, his hands folded over a neat stack of papers. Selena, he said, boy steady, he's finished. The DA's office is building a solid case. But remember, this isn't about revenge. It's about closure. I nodded slowly. Closure sounds like peace, doesn't it? Harold smiled faintly. Yes. And you've earned it. By the end of the week, Marcus was spiraling. Calls went unanswered. Partners pulled out. Liana started packing a suitcase. When Marcus caught her in the bedroom folding clothes into a duffel bag, he snapped. You're not leaving me. She froze. I have to, Marcus. They're coming for everything. I can't stay here and pretend it's fine. He grabbed her wrist, not hard, but desperate. It was all for us. I did this for you, for the baby. She yanked away. Don't lie again. You did it for yourself. The argument spilled down the stairs, echoing through the hall like a broken symphony. I stood by the doorway, silent, watching. I didn't interrupt. Not because I enjoyed it, but because truth was finally doing what I never could. That evening, Ava, the woman Marcus had deceived before me, came by. She stood in the foyer, looking around the house that once symbolized success. I can't believe it, she said softly. He fooled us all. I nodded. Marcus was never after love. He was after validation. Ava's eyes glistened. You could have destroyed him long ago. Why wait? I exhaled, glancing toward the window where dusk painted the walls in golden gray. Because some truths need to grow roots before they bloom. You can't rush justice. Within days, the story broke on every local channel. Reporters stood outside the courthouse, microphones catching the buzz. Neighbors whispered in grocery aisles. The same people who once envied Marcus now pitted him. And through it all, I stayed silent. No statements. No interviews. No revenge speeches. Just silence, calm, sharp, cleansing. Because I knew the world didn't need me to explain who Marcus really was. He'd done that himself. It happened on a gray Thursday morning. Jace was at school. Liana was in the kitchen, still shaken. Then the knock came. Firm. Rhythmic. Final. Marcus walked to the door, pale. When he opened it, the same officer stood there. Mr. Grant, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of forgery and property fraud. The sound of those words seemed to slice through the air. Liana gasped, covering her mouth. Marcus didn't move, just stood there, stunned, as the officer read his rights. He turned toward me once more, eyes hollow. You did this, he said quietly. I stepped forward, my voice calm. No, Marcus. You did this the day you decided the truth was optional. He flinched, like the words themselves burned. The officers placed handcuffs around his wrists. The metallic click echoed through the hallway, sharp, cold, irreversible. As they led Marcus out, Liana collapsed onto the stairs. Her sobs filled the house, trembling and desperate. He said he loved me, she cried. He said he'd take care of us. I knelt beside her, my voice gentle. Sometimes love isn't what people give. It's what they take. You have to choose which one you'll believe. She nodded weakly, clutching her child. For the first time, she looked at me not as a rival, but as another woman who had survived him. When the police car finally drove away, silence returned. Not heavy silence, peaceful silence. The kind that fills the air after years of noise. I stepped outside onto the porch, the breeze soft against my skin. Marcus stood in the back seat of the car, head bowed. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Then I whispered to myself, no anger. Just peace. And I meant it. When I walked back inside, my footsteps echoed against the marble floor. The house was large, too large now, but it finally felt honest. No lies hiding in the corners. No masks at the dinner table. Just space, and truth. I passed the mirror in the hallway. For the first time in years, I recognized the woman staring back. Not broken. Not bitter. Just free. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat on the couch, and listened to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the simple sound of peace. Then, softly to myself, I said, justice doesn't shout. It whispers, and lets the world listen. What would you have done if the person who hurt you begged for forgiveness only after losing everything? Would you have stayed to watch, or walked away in peace? There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't scare you anymore. The kind that feels earned, like the soft exhale after years of holding your breath. That's the silence I woke up to that morning. The house was half empty now. Boxes lined the hallway. Drawers pulled open, shelves cleared, picture frames stacked neatly by the door. Jace helped me pack, moving quietly, his face older than his years. He didn't ask where we were going. He just said, wherever we end up, Mom, I'm good. As long as it's peaceful. Peace. That word used to sound like a dream. Now, it sounded like home. When I reached the last bedroom, my mother's old guest room, I found her antique dresser still standing there, untouched. Its drawers still smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. I sat down on the edge of the bed and pulled one open. Inside were small things, a folded scarf, a pearl earring, a faded photo of her smiling at me during nursing school graduation. And then, a letter. The envelope was yellowed at the edges, my name written in her careful cursive. For Selena, when you forget who you are. My heart clenched. I hadn't seen her handwriting in years. I opened it slowly, the paper soft from time and age. Her words were steady, gentle, like she was sitting beside me again. My dear Selena. If you're reading this, then life has tested you. Maybe it broke your heart. Maybe it made you question your worth. But let me remind you of something you've always known: peace is not found in winning battles. It's found in knowing you never became what hurt you. There will come a day when forgiveness will look impossible. When anger feels like your only armor. On that day, remember, you were born to heal, not to hate. I won't be there to hold your hand, but I'll be there in every sunrise you watch without fear, in every night you sleep without tears. Love always, Mom. For a long time, I couldn't move. My fingers trembled as I held the letter against my chest. I had cried before, over Marcus, over betrayal, over survival, but this was different. This was release. It wasn't sadness. It was surrender. Like my heart had finally stopped fighting the war it didn't start. Tears fell quietly, warm and unashamed. Each one felt like letting go of another piece of pain I'd carried too long. When I finally stood up, I glanced across the room at the photo frame, the same one I used to dust every Sunday. The one that once held our wedding picture. It was still lying face down on the nightstand. I picked it up, opened the back, and replaced the photo. In its place, I slid in my mother's letter. Then I set the frame upright again. Because some memories don't need to be displayed, they need to be transformed. Later that afternoon, I sat by the window with my journal open, the same one that once held pages of heartbreak, plans, and pain. Now it was time to write the final entry. I flipped to the last page and wrote, slowly, carefully. Today, I begin again. Not as a wife, not as a survivor, but as myself. The woman who stayed kind when she had every reason not to. Then I placed my mother's letter beside that page, folded it gently, and closed the book. The sound of the cover shutting felt like the closing of a chapter, literal and spiritual. I heard soft footsteps behind me. Mom? I turned to see Jay standing in the doorway. His hair was messy from the boxes, his shirt streaked with dust. He was holding something in his hands, a small envelope, creased and old. There's something you should see, he said quietly. My heartbeat slowed. What is it? He stepped closer and handed it to me. It was in Dad's desk. I didn't mean to snoop. I was just helping pack his things. I looked down at the envelope. No name. No address. Just the faint imprint of a ring where his hand must have rested often. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Marcus's handwriting, shaky and uneven. Selena. If you're reading this, I don't know where I am anymore, maybe in a cell, maybe free, maybe nowhere at all. I used to think success meant control. But now I see it only meant fear, fear of not being enough. You didn't deserve what I did. You were the only person who ever believed in me without condition. I can't undo the pain, but I hope one day you'll find peace, not for me, but for yourself. Tell Jace. I'm sorry. Marcus. The ink had smudged near the end, as if he'd stopped writing mid-thought. I sat still for a long time. The man who had broken me was finally human again, not through power, but through regret. And strangely, I didn't feel anger. Just a quiet ache for the version of him that might have been good, if only he had chosen truth sooner. Jay sat beside me, silent. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes, I said softly, forgiveness doesn't mean you invite someone back into your life. It just means you stop carrying them in your heart. He nodded, his young eyes wise beyond his age. I think Grandma would be proud of you. I smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe she'd just say, it's about time. We both laughed, the first genuine laughter this house had heard in years. As the sun dipped low, I walked outside one last time. The porch creaked beneath my feet. The air smelled like rain and magnolia. Across the street, the neighbors pretended not to stare, but I smiled anyway. Because this time I wasn't the woman they pitied. I was the woman who survived her own silence and turned it into strength. I closed the front door gently behind me. The sound didn't echo this time. It just settled. Maybe peace doesn't come when life stops hurting. Maybe it comes when you stop letting pain define you. My mother was right, you don't need to win every battle. You just need to walk away with your soul still intact. As I loaded the last box into the car, Jace's voice called from inside the house, "Mom, there's something you should see." The camera pans to Selena's face, her eyes widen slightly, the faintest shadow of curiosity flickers across her expression. She turns toward the door, steps back inside. "What do you think Jace found? Was it redemption, or another secret Marcus left behind? Please share your thoughts." The house was empty now. No footsteps. No voices. Just the hum of the wind brushing against the curtains, soft, rhythmic, final. Jace and I stood in the doorway, surrounded by boxes and the ghosts of what used to be our life. "Mom," Jace said quietly, tugging at my sleeve. "Come here." He led me into the living room. The evening light poured through the window, washing the walls in amber. And there, on the old wooden table, was a candle, the same one Marcus used to light every night when he came home from work. Its glass was cracked at the rim. The wick almost burned down. Yet somehow, it still flickered. "I lit it for you," Jace said. "Because you never stopped believing in light." His words landed deeper than he knew. In that moment, the candle wasn't just wax and flame, it was everything we had survived. Every sleepless night, every broken promise, every silent prayer that life could begin again. I knelt beside him, watching the tiny flame sway in the stillness. Its reflection shimmered in my eyes, a soft reminder that even after everything, I hadn't gone dark. Peace isn't silence. It's strength that no longer needs to prove itself. That night, I walked through each room one last time. The creak of the floorboards felt like a goodbye. Each wall held echoes, laughter, arguments, whispers, dreams. But this time I didn't feel haunted. I felt released. Before stepping out, I turned toward the window and looked at the candle still burning. For years, that light had belonged to Marcus, a symbol of his return. Now, it belonged to me. It wasn't waiting anymore. It was remembering. Weeks later, I found myself on the edge of a small seaside town 2 states away. The kind of place where mornings smelled like salt and coffee, and nights hummed with the sound of waves instead of traffic. I'd taken a nursing position at a local clinic, modest, peaceful, full of kind faces who didn't ask about the past. I rented a small house near the water, white porch, blue shutters, wildflowers growing along the fence. And every evening, I sat on that porch, listening to the sea breathe in and out. No more noise. No more pretending. Just quiet, honest life. Sometimes Jace would sit beside me, sketching in his notebook. Other times, I'd watch him run along the sand, his laughter cutting through the ocean wind. And sometimes, only sometimes, when the sun slipped below the horizon, I'd light that same candle again. Not for Marcus. Not for the past. But for the version of myself that finally came home. Love doesn't die when trust is broken. It changes form, it becomes memory, prayer, hope. I used to think love meant staying, fighting, forgiving, waiting. Now I know love can also mean letting go. Walking away without bitterness. Healing in silence. Because some endings aren't about revenge. They're about rebirth. The screen fades to twilight blue. Selena sits by the window of her new home, the candle burning beside her. Its flame dances softly in the reflection, 2 lights merging as one. Outside, the sea murmurs like a lullaby. A faint smile crosses her face, not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that knows peace. Her voice returns, calm and assured. In the end, peace wasn't a place. It was a decision. To stop waiting for someone else to give it to me. She closes her journal one final time, her hand resting gently on the cover. What would you have done in Selena's place? Would you have stayed, or walked away quietly like she did? Tell me your thoughts below. I read every story you share. And if you believe that some stories heal us, even when they hurt, subscribe to Voices of Sephora. Because the next story might be the one that helps you find your own peace.